What goes through your mind, Will, as you get ready to hear the president make what is certainly going to be a predictable statement urging Congress to go ahead and do the right thing, let all these millions and millions of middle-class American families have this $1,000 a year or $1,500 a year tax cut continue?
You know, Wolf, I think what goes to my mind is what we're all wondering is how he's going to suggest that will be paid for. That's the cliched term of the moment. How will it be paid for? And I think Gloria's right. It does put Republicans in a tough position to defend extending the Bush tax cuts, but be opposed to extending the payroll tax. What I think you'll find is they won't be opposed to extending the payroll tax cut. The entire argument will be about how it will be paid for. Now, I think to respond to one thing Gloria said, I think it's a tough argument for Democrats to make as well, that we want to extend this payroll tax cut, but we don't have any room anywhere within the government spending budget to cut anything back to pay for that. Republicans on their side have suggested we ought to just freeze government wages to pay for this. You know, why is that not a legitimate thing?
A lot of Republicans are saying there's so much bloat and so much fat in the government, Roland, that go ahead if you want to continue this tax cut for the middle class, and everyone seems to want to continue it, then go ahead and start cutting. I interviewed Ron Paul, the Republican presidential candidate, the other day, and he said basically bring home thousands and thousands of American civilians from Iraq. Now that all U.S. troops are about to leave, thousands of American diplomats at the world's largest U.S. embassy in Baghdad. That alone could pay for a lot of this, Roland.
Wolf, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. But to Gloria's point and what Will said, the reason Republicans are stating this is because they will not admit that the Bush tax cuts contributed to our deficit. They have been trying to deny this over and over and over again. And if you look at the CBO numbers, the Congressional Budget Office, it shows during those 8 years, some $5 trillion added to the federal deficit. And so all of a sudden, they don't want to say that. So when they say, oh, we need offsets, it's because they recognize that was part of the problem. And so Democrats have them in a bind because they're saying, wait a minute, Grover Norquist is your guy. You guys love tax cuts. But now you're seeing the reality that when you cut taxes, you're taking in less revenue and it adds to the deficit. And that's why they're stuck in this sort of conundrum, because they don't want to own up to that real hard fact.
It's a sensitive issue. Will, stand by for a moment because Gloria wants to weigh in on it. Gloria.
Well, I mean, you have Republicans essentially saying tax cuts pay for themselves. So why do we even have to pay for it? Because in the end,
it's not true.
It's going to pay for itself. Well, that's the disagreement between the Democrats and the Republicans. But there is now this split in the Republican Party. Some Republicans continuing to say, like Scott Brown in Massachusetts, for example, you don't need to pay for it now because it'll pay for itself. And other Republicans saying, you know what? We actually do need to pay for it because it's not going to pay for itself. So
it's because it's not true, Gloria.
The party has a division.
Right. Right. The Republicans are dancing around this because their argument is simply not true. The numbers are the numbers. We can't have optional facts. When the CBO says, when they score it, when they say the Bush tax cuts contributed to the deficit, we saw this whole argument play out in December when President Obama had the extension. When they said, let's cut the $700 billion of the richest folks in the country because it adds to the deficit. So they don't want to say tax cuts are contributing to the deficit, but this is their way of saying, oh, no, we need to have offsets. That's another way of saying it. So they want to deny reality.
All right, let me let Will Cain react to that. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I want to agree with one thing Gloria is saying. The very important split here is the split within the Republican Party. You have men like Tom Coburn, men who were involved in the Bowles-Simpson Commission for Deficit Reduction are similarly the same guys who are now saying we have to pay for these tax cuts. They're not the guys making the argument that every single tax cut leads to economic growth and will therefore contribute to deficit reduction. Then you have guys in the Grover Norquist vein who make that exact argument. I think that's an interesting split. But the argument really is, how do you pay for it? And the argument in return that all Republicans will make simultaneously is pay for it with plenty of government waste, plenty of government spending to cut back on. Why must you trade one tax for another tax? Why is that the only solution to paying for things? Why can't government ever be?
It's real simple, Will. It's simple. Because they don't want to have to touch those pork barrel projects. The Republicans don't want to have to touch defense. And then you have Democrats who don't want to confront Social Security and Medicare. The three largest areas of our budget and our deficit. You're dealing with entitlements. You're also dealing with defense. And both sides refuse to touch it. But no one wants to put it on the table because they know that they don't want to appeal. They don't want to hurt those key voters who are going to be going to the polls in primaries and the general election next year. That's the real truth.
You know, if you're a true believer and you're a Republican who believes that the tax cuts will pay for themselves, the question really is not how do you pay for it, but why do you pay for it, right? I mean, why pay for it at all? The Democrats, ironically, are acting much more like the conservative Republicans here. It's kind of an odd alliance, but they're actually saying we want the tax cuts, but we also believe we need to pay for them. And that's where the surtax on the millionaires
what the Democrats are doing, Gloria, and I want to take a quick break, the Democrats, they want to pay for it by raising taxes on rich people,
wealthy,
on people earning $1 million a year or more. A couple 100,000 people fit into that category, and the Republicans are saying they're not going to be increasing taxes on even millionaires or billionaires, as the president likes to say.